Lanturn is an unremarkable looking Pokemon, and in most generations it isn't too relevant competitively, tending to be ranked in the lower tiers. But this interesting fish has actually had more competitive success than you might expect. Released in Gen 2, Lanturn was not terrible in its debut game. Its stats are poor overall, but that fantastic HP stat and the surprisingly useful water-electric typing do have a bit of application. Lanturn would really come into its own in Gen 3, when it received the ability Volt Absorb. This is an excellent ability, granting complete immunity to electric type attacks and even healing you if struck by one. Lanturn now had a new claim to fame as a counter to the popular Bolt Beam coverage combination. Bolt Beam refers to the complementary combination of electric and ice. Electric is a strong attacking type, but it can be answered by ground types who are immune and grass types who resist. Ice deals super effective damage to ground and grass, covering these weaknesses. On the other hand, ice is answered by water types who resist, but electric hits water super effectively. You can see why these two types complement one another so well. Bolt Beam will solidly threaten most Pokemon in the game, but Lanturn is a rare Pokemon who not only resists ice, but is immune to electric, making Bolt Beam completely ineffective. And it turns out that this positive quality of Lanturn's would age pretty well. In Generation 8 OU, 20 years after Lanturn was first released, legendary team builder and ladder player Pinkacross would find a use for the funny fish on a competitive team. Despite officially being ranked in the PU tier, Lanturn ended up being an important member of this team that reached number 1 in the entire world. Let's explore how Lanturn made history. A modest, older generation Pokemon finding success in a modern metagame amongst some of the strongest threats we've ever seen. But first, an important update. The Horse Council Civil War has reached its boiling point. Both sides have marched forth towards the Trident, where Makago and Horsey will now face off for a 1v1 melee. The fate of our world as we know it rests on the outcome of this battle. Regardless of which side you support, please subscribe to the Jimothy Cool channel so that we may see a swift end to this horrible situation. Thank you. So why is Lanturn seemingly more effective in Gen 8 OU than it was in previous generations of OU? In Generation 3, when Lanturn first received Volt Absorb, it was almost good. There are a lot of Bolt Beam abusers in Generation 3, like Jolteon and Zapdos, and especially Offensive Starmie, a famously difficult Pokemon to switch in against. Lanturn is totally safe against the Bolt Beam combo and even Hydro Pump. The player's Super Epic Ampharos started a bit of a Lanturn resurgence a couple of years ago, experimenting with an aggressive approach to the Pokemon, taking advantage of the switch in against threats like Jolteon and Starmie to start applying offensive pressure. Lanturn can run enough speed to outrun Tyranitar, and with Stab Hydro Pump, learning the Bolt Beam combination itself, and Hidden Power Grass for coverage against Swampert, this could actually be a pretty effective threat. This was a fresh new approach to using Lanturn, and it was pretty effective for a time, taking advantage of the Pokemon's positive matchup into Bolt Beam and converting that into aggression. Dugtrio is a big concern for Lanturn, but a proactive Hydro Pump predicting an incoming Dugtrio was a common sequence that would get you a high reward, but as people adapted to this new Lanturn set, cracks started to form. The novelty and surprise value would wear off, and Lanturn's low speed, general frailty to strong neutral hits, and vulnerability to grass coverage, which is actually more common on electric types than ice coverage in this metagame, would cause serious problems. This will be a common problem for Lanturn throughout the years, because sometimes electric types choose grass coverage instead of ice coverage, and in that case Lanturn does not work against these electric types. In Gen 3 Ubers, Lanturn actually had a solid role as a counter to specific Latios sets that run Thunder and Ice Beam as their only attacks. A surprisingly effective way to use Lanturn. And in Generation 5 OU, players also experimented with Lanturn occasionally. In Generation 5, Permanent Rain exists in the OU format thanks to Politoed, and a popular way to take advantage of this is with Thunder, which is perfectly accurate in the rain. Hidden Power Ice tends to be the complementary recovery of choice in this format too because of the prominence of times 4 Ice Weak Pokemon like Garchomp, Landorus Therian, and Dragonite. Lanturn was actually used in a Gen 5 OU tournament game by the player Rua, and it did a good job, preventing Thundurus Therian from being too much of a threat. You may expect Lanturn to have some value in Gen 7 OU, where Tapu Koko is an all-new face in the metagame, but this metagame is known for being very aggressive and high power level, with a lot of strong neutral attacking offensive threats that you need to cover. And when you consider that, as well as the presence of Z moves in the metagame, Lanturn starts to feel like dead weight as a team slot. That's why Gen 8 OU was the perfect environment for Lanturn to actually be effective again. Gen 8 significantly lowered the power level, with the terrain boost from the Tapus being nerfed, and Z moves no longer longer existing, as well as various defensive tools and Pokemon becoming much better. And there was something else that really benefited Lanturn: the removal of the move Hidden Power. For generations, Hidden Power has been used as a universal coverage option that most Pokemon can learn, granting you filler coverage against anything that you want. Now that electric types cannot run that grass coverage, Lanturn is much more effective at answering them. This is particularly effective against Zapdos, who has relied on Hidden Power for coverage for generations. Back in Gen 3, that hard-hitting Hidden Power grass would ruin your day, but now this is impossible. Zapdos relies more on Hurricane as its alternative attack, a hard-hitting flying stab option, but you also resist flying because of your electric typing. In Gen 8, Lanturn is one of the most effective Zapdos switch-ins in the entire game, actually, and it is also very good against Tapu Koko. Off the back of your massive HP stat, with full special defense investment, Lanturn can actually be pretty bulky and even help you out against threats like Blacephalon and Dragapult. And Lanturn has pretty solid utility options too. Lanturn gets access to Heal Bell, which cures you and all of your team from status ailments. Thunder Wave can inflict paralysis. Scald is perfect not only to hit ground types super effectively that might try to come in against you, but also to spread burn. And Volt Switch is a wonderful option to keep momentum up and get powerful threats like Kartana and Tapu Bulu onto the field. Although Volt Switch can be an unreliable pivoting option, since ground types are immune and will have no effect against them. The fact that you also have Scald makes Volt Switch a bit safer to click. Coming straight into Lanturn as a ground type is unsafe because of Scald's damage and burn chance. So Lanturn is providing a lot here. Powerful neutral electric type damage can be very threatening, especially against Tornadus Therian and Clefable on this team. So having the easy Lanturn switch in that can also lead into a progression of your game plan through pivoting, or Heal Bell to support your allies, even Thunder Wave, which enhances the effectiveness of your slow Tapu Bulu and Heatran threats. Lanturn is kind of a perfect fit here. And this brilliant, synergistic use of Lanturn would lead to a very successful team that peaked #1 in the world on Pokemon Showdown. I recently spoke with Pinkacross, the creator of this team, and a fellow YouTuber, on my podcast, The Fridge. One of the things we talked about was Gen 8 OU, which is his favorite metagame. I've been rather dismissive of Gen 8 OU in the past, but I've realized since talking to Pinkacross that it's actually a very interesting metagame where a lot of variety can be explored. Back when Gen 8 was current, Pinkacross peaked #1 on the ladder with so many teams built around novel Pokemon like Alolan Raichu, Heliolisk, and even Porygon Z. And today, Pinkacross continues to innovate in the Gen 9 OU metagame, pushing the boundaries of overlooked Pokemon. Check out his channel if you'd like some good educational content about team building and competitive Pokemon fundamentals. And check out my interview with him if you want a deeper dive into some of these concepts.